The three sacred impulses, those that I mentioned, faith, hope, and love, in the way in which I talked about them, Gurdjieff then comes along in the tales, and he talks about how, especially with the coming of Ashiata Shamash, one of the great messengers, and when Ashiata is born and comes to his maturity, and he's looking around at the state of man, and he goes through great sufferings, and he sits for 60 days or 90 days, and he sits and pulls a hair off his chest every day, okay. So Ashiata finally looks around and he says, my mission is to try to help man free himself from Kundabuffer, from all of the lack of consciousness and so on and so on. So he looks at the prior manifestations of the great messengers. Some have come and they put their central teaching in some form of faith, others in some form of hope, and others in some form of love. And he comes to the conclusion, after a very careful evaluation of all of these, that they didn't work. So he has to take up a different path. And his path is conscience. So conscience, yes, conscience. So the core of Ashiata's teaching is the development in normal three brain beings of the impulse of conscience. Because faith, hope, and love are divine impulses, they are present throughout the universe. They are present in planets, in suns, in everything. And therefore, they're vulnerable because they're out there. Conscience, however, is, as he says, is deeply, deeply buried in our emotional world. And it escapes. You see, faith, hope, and love could be corrupted. And they were corrupted. The message of the great messengers was turned upside down within 3 generations. It all became muck. Okay. So, but conscience was preserved almost in its pristine, infantile form. Okay. And so the teaching of Ashiata is bent on gradually unfolding the reality of conscience and then bringing it to the forefront more and more and more. So many people, many authors have claimed that this is really the core of Gurdjieff's teaching, is conscience, and that Ashiata is a kind of, parallel. Well, take whatever you want out of that. It's certainly a core of the Gurdjieff teaching, is that what he is really, really aiming for to try and unfold in people is a recognition that conscience does exist, that it's very deeply hidden, and that it's going to involve a lot of suffering to get there. And fine, if you want to make that the core, then, to me, Gurdjieff is even bigger than that, okay, even bigger.
Gurdjieff presents us with 3 models of the struggle toward conscience. We need all 3. We need to make efforts together, like the Akaldans. We certainly need help from above, which we have in abundance from Gurdjieff and the interstices of work. We also need to recognize that each of us, in some measure, is attracted to the model of Haji Truve, because there is within each of us a singular something that strives to come to individual self-realization. Each of us is involved, to varying degrees, in the struggle with our physical, emotional, and intellectual aspects. These struggles are unique to each of us, and like Haji, we must struggle to bring conscience to bear in each aspect. In the process, we progressively free ourselves from the crystallized consequences of Kundabuffer and strengthen our presence in the world of being. Conscience is a reflection of the functioning of the higher emotional center. It is the guiding impulse within the Kesjan body. The reason of higher emotional center is more specifically directed toward an understanding of the laws of relationship between self and other, which, when anchored in conscience, always leads toward the effort to serve other. Higher reason is a reflection of the functioning of higher intellectual center. The study and application of higher reason is the coding process of the higher being body. Since all beings with higher reason have conscience, the lawful limitation of higher intellectual center and of the higher being body lies in the totality of self-awareness of all separate large and small cosmic concentrations, and by which not only are the gradations of their reason measured, but there is also determined their, as it is called, degree of the justification of the sense and aim of their existence, but also the further role of each separate individual in relation to everything existing in our great megalocosmos. Higher reason is not limited to the intellectual understanding of law. Having conscience incorporated within it, higher reason is always in service and also is thoroughly practical, being able to decide and direct the most appropriate physical manifestation into worlds 48 and 24. It is thus the consummate expression of a fully realized three-brained being. Conscience, clearly, is not a behavioral formula, a codification of appropriate manifestations. For a three-brained being who aspires to self-realization, conscience, the constant struggle of two quite opposite complexes, is a perpetual striving in all relational events. In this regard, there are no insignificant events. Each event, involving directly or indirectly a child, adult, animal, or group of people, or thing, presents the opportunity to struggle. Conscience is only possible in the third state of consciousness. Ultimately, conscience is an operant aspect, a consciousness within the struggle, of all relationships with others, all relationships being inclusive of living beings and non-living things. Everything has an appropriate value in our universe, and while its role in relationships may appear to be quite relative, it must be considered. This is also essential to see. Each event, because it is dimensionalized by the mechano-coinciding Mid-Nell-Lin, is an absolutely unique event in the megalocosmos. Even endlessness could not have foreseen it, the laws here in World 48 being so subject, by its law, to the mixing of the conditional and the unconditional. The power of seeing the uniqueness of each event, potentially, can be extraordinarily helpful to us in the role we can play. Regardless of the seeming ordinariness of so many of life's events, it is not so. They are ordinary only when we do not respond from need. This need is both our own, for true individuality, and its possibilities of giving itself up at the Cedo, and the need of endlessness. This is real transformation. Every event, full of the potential of the sacred, to the degree of its dimension, its chewing off from the mechanical energies coming in at 3, a larger or smaller piece of World 48, and World 96, if we are strong enough in our capacity to stand at points 7 and 8.
What he is really, really aiming for to try and unfold in people is a recognition that conscience does exist, that it's very deeply hidden, and that it's going to involve a lot of suffering to get there. And fine, if you want to make that the core, then, to me, Gurdjieff is even bigger than that.